Evolutions. The most exciting part of every Pokémon game. You see, this got me wondering, what if the 18 Pokémon types could evolve as well? I give each one of them a unique evolution that activates every 4th turn. Let me explain how this evolution mechanic would work inside of a real game. I'm going to use the normal type as a reference. In the first 3 turns nothing really happens, and these turns play out like usual, but every 4th turn the normal typing evolves into the bizarre typing. Now on the 5th turn the bizarre typing disappears and devolves back to the normal typing, but this evolution comes back every 4th turn. Now before the evolution turn starts, you also have the option to switch to another party Pokemon if you want to use a different type evolution. So it's a smart idea to have multiple types on your team, since some of these evolutions focus on healing, for example. If the Pokemon is a dual type, for example fire and flying, in that case you can choose the flying or fire evolution. And this is not locked, so you can pick again during the next evolution turn. There's one final thing I want to mention. Some moves won't work on the final turn before the evolution turn starts. For example fly, dig or dive. Basically any move that has a hidden stage where you're invulnerable to damage. The same goes for moves like protect, which you can't use on the evolution turn neither. With that said, let's start with the first evolution. The Ghost-type Pokémon memorizes the attacks it saw during the first 3 turns, simply by copying the moves and adding them to its own moveset during the evolution turn. Now this also works if a teammate of the Ghost-type is on the field for the first 3 turns. You just have to make sure the Ghost-type is switched in during the evolution turn. Now let's say the moves that got used during the first 3 turns were the Dark move Crunch, the strong Dragon-type move Draco Meteor, and finally the Psychic-type move Rest. Now with that said, you also have the ability to change the typing of these 3 moves to a ghost type, basically turning them into stab moves. I'd say this type evolution is really fun to play around with, unless you're facing a pet rat which spams 3 tackles in a row. In that case you're better off using another type evolution. The fighting type Pokemon has a glowing aura around its body, after an extreme training session in the mountains. For this turn the fighting type Pokemon reflects damage from the opponent's special or physical attacks by 15%. But here's the twist. You also have a choice to reflect the damage onto one of the opponent's party Pokemon that are currently not on the field. However, it won't faint them, it will just leave them with 1 HP, if they already had low HP to begin with. But you can also reflect the damage onto the opposing Pokemon that is currently on the field. The choice is yours. One final thing. If the opponent decides to use a status move this turn, then the aura glows brighter and expands, giving the opponent the burn status condition on the next turn, right after the evolution turn ends. And obviously the fighting type can use moves as well this turn. The reflected damage is simply the special ability for this typing. The Psychic Pokemon uses telekinesis to lift Pokemon that have status conditions, which powers up the new move Elemental Telekinesis. Let me explain how this evolution works in this 6v6 scenario. The Snorlax on your team has the burn status condition, and on the opponent's team there's a Sceptile with the poison status condition. The Psychic type lifts these Pokemon up, it doesn't matter if it's an opponent or ally Pokemon, and it adds these status conditions to their own move. This turns the Elemental Telekinesis into a fire and poison type move at the same time. It will still do 80 power points of damage, and you can only add 2 types at the same time. So if there are more than 2 Pokemon in the game who have status conditions, you can only pick 2 of them. Let's add a dummy Pokemon so we can see how much damage this will do in total. Let's take the Pokemon Meowscarada, who is gonna take 4 times damage in total, since this Pokemon has a fire and poison type weakness at the same time, which are both added to this new move. If there aren't any status conditions on any of the Pokemon in the game, then this move will do a standard 80 damage and it's just a psychic move. Here are all the status conditions and the different types they will add to the new move. Now most of them should be obvious, however the sleep status condition is not really tied to any specific typing. So I added the ghost typing for this one, since that makes the most sense in my opinion. The ice Pokemon uses its cold breath to create a glacial shield around its body that will protect the Pokemon from incoming damage. The shield grows stronger if moves from the same typing are being used in a row, even if the moves aren't ice type moves. So for example, let's say you have a teammate Swampert on the field for the first 3 turns, and the Pokemon only used 3 water moves in a row. If you switch to an ice type on the 4th turn and activate the glacial evolution, the shield will be added to the current remaining health of the ice type Pokemon. Now since 3 water moves were used, the shield would be 40%. It won't protect protect the user from 2x attacks, and it has the same weaknesses as the original Pokémon. It will just act as a barrier that tanks damage. Now if only 2 attacks were used in a row of any type, the shield would be 25%. And if only 1 attack was used, the shield would be 15% in total. Now in addition to all this, the Ice type moves deal 10% more damage this turn. The Flying type Pokémon performs a vertical ascent, ranging from 0 feet up to 13 feet in height. This is always randomized and gives a special boost depending on how high the Pokémon flies. Let me explain, we're going to use a Golurk as the opposing Pokémon. Now this is a tall Pokémon coming in at 9 feet in height. First we're going with the most likely scenario that the flying Pokémon flies higher than the opposing Pokémon's height. In this case we ascend to 12 feet in height. If this happens, the Pokémon uses a combination of the moves Drill Peck and Air Slash, basically launching itself at the opponent from above. Additionally, this would have a 30% chance to flinch the opponent on the next turn. Next, if the flying Pokémon flies to around the same height as the opposing Pokémon, which would be between 8 and 10 feet in height since we are facing a Golurk, you would be at face level to this Pokémon at this height. In this case, the flying type would use a combination of Drill Peck and Sand Attack. It would spit sand in the opponent's face, which would lower the opponent's accuracy by 1 stage on the next turn. This would be a guaranteed stat lowering effect. For the final combination of attacks, and this is a more rare scenario since most Pokémon are shorter than 3 feet, but if the user Pokémon manages to fly lower than the opponent's height, let's say we ascend to 3 feet in height, the Golurk would be looking down at us from this angle. In this case, the flying type charges at the Golurk from below, which would be a combination of the moves Drill Peck and Hurricane. And this has the secondary effect of confusing the opponent on the next turn. However, the chance of this happening is 30%. The rock Pokémon shines bright and turns itself into a diamond. The chance of hitting a critical hit increases by 10% for each type that matches with the opponent's team. Let's look at an example. Team 1 has 12 different types in total across every Pokémon. And if we compare that to the team of the opponent, 6 of these types match in total, meaning the chance of hitting a critical hit with the next rock move will be 60%. Besides that, the accuracy of every rock move will be 100% this turn. And let's say the critical hit doesn't happen, in that case the rock Pokémon increases its special defense by 1 stage on the next turn to compensate for that. The next typing is a bit complex, let me explain. The dragon Pokémon ate a mysterious fruit, which turned it into a Hydra with 3 heads. Now we all know this meme with the Hydra that has 1 goofy head on the right side, and the other 2 heads are looking annoyed. Well, that's almost exactly what this Hydra evolution is, except the Hydra has 2 goofy heads. Now the 2 goofy heads simply don't know that they are dragon types, so they both attack with 18 randomized moves that have between 40 and 60 power points. And each one of these moves is a different typing. This is important for later. Some of these 18 moves normally give a secondary effect, like boosting attack or lowering the opponent's stats, for example. These secondary effects won't work for the Hydra heads, it's just the damage. Now the next part is insane, so hear me out. The smart dragon head analyzes and remembers which moves the 2 goofy heads used. For example, they used the grass move Trailblaze and the electric move Shockwave. This means after the Hydra turn is over, for the next 3 turns, the opponent can't switch to a grass or electric type Pokémon. But if the opponent switches to one of these 2 types anyways, there's a huge punishment waiting on the 8th turn, which is the next evolution turn. The Hydra gets enraged and gets the move Roar of Justice in its moveset. Now this move also gets a secondary effect that has a 50% chance to paralyze the opponent's Pokémon after the evolution turn is over. And let's say the opponent faints, in that case the status condition will get sent over to the next opponent on the field. Finally, if the opponent doesn't switch to a electric or grass type, then they are pretty much safe from this dangerous attack. And the 8th turn is gonna be like the previous evolution turn, where the 2 goofy Hydra heads attack, and 2 new types will be selected once again. The dark type Pokémon combines its powers with the ghost and normal type Pokémon, sending shivers down the spines of the opponent. This Pokémon gets an evolution move called Fear or Normal. For every dark, ghost or normal type move that's on your team, it increases the power points of this move by 10. Let's say you have a team of 6 Pokemon and each one of them has 2 normal type moves. In that case you have 12 moves in total, and this fully maxes out the power points of the move Fear or Normal. However, ghost and dark type moves also count, so you're not restricted to only normal type moves. If this move is fully maxed out, it will deal 120 power points of damage and get a secondary effect depending if you have more normal type moves or ghost and dark type moves in total on your team. If you have more normal type moves in total, the opponent is spooked by the scary looking normal type Pokemon and their speed is lowered by 1 stage on the next turn. If you have more dark and ghost type moves on the team, the fear gets unleashed and there's a 50% chance the opponent gets the paralyzed status condition on the next turn. The grass Pokemon spawns a giant ancient tree on the field that has mysterious magical leaves. After the grass type used any move, the tree releases the magical leaves, which heals the grass type for 25%. It also plants Leech Seed on the opponent's side of the field. That goes into effect on the next turn. And that's pretty much it for this type. Now most of the time grass Pokemon are dual types, so you can choose to have an effective damage boosting evolution or a Tree of Life evolution that heals the Pokemon. The fairy Pokemon gains the royal status and got a present from a mysterious traveler. This present contains 18 Pokemon eggs with different colors. Each egg contains a baby Pokemon and they all represent a specific typing based on their color. Most of these are the iconic baby Pokemon we all know, but I had to add some new baby Pokemon as well. During the evolution turn, the fairy type summons 1 randomized egg on the field that hatches into a random baby Pokemon that currently only knows the move Quick Attack. However, this move is based on their typing, so for example if Elekid spawns, the move turns into an electric type move. The baby Pokemon is invulnerable to damage during the evolution turn and attacks once after the main fairy type Pokemon used a move. Now here's where this gets interesting. If there's a spot open in your team, let's say an ally Pokemon has fainted, this baby Pokemon will get added to your team after the evolution turn is over. And during the next evolution turn, which is the 8th turn in this case, you have the option to fully evolve the baby Pokemon if it's still in your party. Now the fairy type has to be on the field and can't attack during this turn, which makes it extremely vulnerable, but in exchange you get a fully evolved member to the team. So this might be a worthy sacrifice. Once the baby Pokemon fully evolves, you're allowed to give the Pokemon a moveset. From all the level up and TM moves the Pokemon is capable of learning. The electric Pokemon charges up and releases a powerful new attack. Now this works a bit different than other types since you charge up this evolution move in the previous 3 turns before the evolution turn starts. Each time you use a electric type move, it charges the meter by 33.34%. And any electric move works for charging this meter, even status moves. Next, for fire, steel, ice, bug and dark type moves, it charges the meter by 25% for each attack. This means that ally Pokemon in the team can also charge this meter. And finally, for every other type, it charges the meter by 20%. If you don't use the electric type evolution on the 4th turn, it resets the charged meter on the 5th turn. So you can stack the fully charged meter. Now let's talk about the exciting part, the new evolution move, which is called Charged Sap. This move can deal up to 130 power points of damage if the bar is fully maxed out, which means you have to use 3 electric type moves in a row. And for reference, the move would deal 80 power points of damage if the charged meter is at 60%, which would be the lowest possible outcome. The normal type Pokemon goes on a bizarre adventure and learned many new abilities, from fighting against dragons, exploring caves and discovering magical lands. During this turn, the normal type Pokemon can choose between 10 randomized types that are always different and can be any type besides normal. If the normal type Pokemon is a mono type, let's say for example the Pokemon Bidoof, then this new typing gets added as a secondary typing for this turn. Now if the Pokemon was already a dual typing, for example the Pokemon Barrel, then the secondary water typing gets replaced with the new typing for this turn. This way the normal type Pokemon gets a strong defensive advantage against opponents. Now I also give a secondary boost, and that's a 15% power increase of all normal type moves during the evolution turn. I added this as an extra power up since other types are more focused on offensive type evolutions. The ground Pokemon uses its earth powers to shape their own domain and trap the opponent and the user inside. It's also able to control the temperature, and with that it spawns one of these 4 weather conditions: sunshine, rain, hail, and a sandstorm. Additionally, they also gain a secondary typing depending on which weather condition has been chosen. Those types are fire, water, ice, or steel. Now let's say the Pokemon chose the sunshine weather and they already have a secondary typing, for example Mamoswine. In this scenario, the Pokemon would switch out its ice typing for a fire typing. And just like the normal type evolution, you won't be able to switch out the ground typing in this case. They can also choose one of these moves depending on the weather condition they have chosen. They get the moves Surf or Aqua Tail if they chose the rain weather condition. Next, they get the fire type moves Flamethrower or Temper Flare for a sunshine. If they chose the cold hail weather condition, they get the ice moves Aurora Beam or Avalanche. And finally, they get the steel moves Smart Strike and Flash Cannon for a sandstorm. All of these moves are stab moves and can be boosted because of the weather condition. For example, the fire type moves inside of a sunshine would deal more damage than usual. The bug Pokemon calls in reinforcements and gains a new evolution move called Swarm. Technically, this is a multi-hit move which can attack 3 to 5 times, but the bug Pokemon and the reinforcements will all attack at the same time. The power of the move increases by 25 power points for every bug that's attacking, meaning the move will have 75, 100 or 125 power points in total, depending how many bugs are called in. Now you can also pick a secondary effect that lowers one of the opponent's stats. For example, let's say you're up against a fast Pokemon like Greninja. A smart move would be to pick the speed debuff, secondary effect. Now for each member of the bug swarm, there's a 25% chance it will lower the speed stat of the opponent Greninja. Meaning if the swarm attacks 5 times during the evolution turn, there's a high chance the opponent's speed stat is lowered by at least 2 stages. But this effect will go in after the evolution turn is over. The fire Pokemon glows a bright flame around itself, creating a visible heat wave that acts like a barrier for the Pokemon. Opponents using contact moves on the fire type will take 20% reflected damage because of the heat. However, if the opponent uses a special attack move or a status move, the fire type heals for 20% instead, because the heat wave stays comfy around the Pokemon for the entire evolution turn. This will also take away any status conditions or any stat lowering effects. Basically, it cleanses the entire Pokemon. The water Pokemon summons a portal that's connected to a fresh water sea, where almost every water type lives besides legendary and mythical Pokemon. After the user Pokemon enters the portal, which in this case is a Golduck, 10 water types swim curiously towards the user Pokemon. These are randomized every evolution turn, but water Pokemon with 2 types have a higher chance of appearing. Next, the party Pokemon Golduck switches with one of these 10 Pokemon. And after that you have 30 seconds to pick a moveset since you're still in an active Pokemon battle. We're gonna choose the Pokemon Gyarados for reference. You can pick any of the level up and TM moves that Gyarados is capable of learning. In this case I chose the moves Surf, Scald, Aerial Ace and Protect. After that you can choose one of the abilities, and for this Pokemon we are gonna choose Intimidate, since this ability does in fact work after Gyarados joins the battle. Finally, the original Pokemon Golduck transfers the held item over to Gyarados for this turn, which in this case is a water gem. After the evolution turn ends, your previous Pokemon Golduck returns to the field and the Gyarados goes back to the portal. The Steel type gets 2 evolutions, and they are called Titanium and Armored. They are very similar, but Titanium halves the user's weight, and Armored does the exact opposite. It doubles the weight of the user. This is important depending if you want your Steel Pokemon to be heavy or not. Next you can choose between one of these 4 different moves, which are all based on the weight of the user or the opponent. Picking the right move is key here. At the start of the evolution turn, your own weight and also the opponent's weight will be displayed on screen, so you can form a strategy. Just like the Ghost evolution, you're allowed to change these moves into Steel type moves if you want to, but you're not forced to, so it's just an option. The Poison type Pokemon spreads a virus on the opposing team, depending on how much health is left on the user Pokemon. If the Poison type Pokemon has full health or a green health bar, 2 Pokemon in the opposing team take 15% damage. Now this damage will always go to the Pokemon that have the most HP left, but it would never faint a Pokemon that's not on the field. It would leave them with 1 HP instead. If the user Pokemon has a yellow health bar, basically if the health is below 50%, then the 3 Pokemon in the opposing team with the most health take 11% damage each. Finally, if the Poison type has its health bar in red, in that case the 4 Pokemon with the most health on the opposing team take 9% damage each. And that was the final one. I tried to balance out every type evolution, so each Pokemon is battling on an even playing field. But some types might appear stronger than others. Keep that in mind. I want to mention one final thing. Let's say you're facing an opponent's Sceptile, which is a fast Pokemon that moves before you most of the time, and it manages to feint your Pokemon on the evolution turn. In this case, the Pokemon ends up with 0 HP, but is still able to play a move before fainting. I think this is fair because otherwise fast Pokemon would be outperforming slower Pokemon. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Maybe there's one typing you find too strong or a little too weak. Or maybe you have your own unique idea for a type evolution. I'm very curious to see your ideas and creativity. With that said, thanks for watching my content until the end.